like to acknowledge, I'd like to acknowledge Reverend Michiko Brown Kai, Reverend Aaron Michkota, Therese Samuel, Reverend Pix Butt, Peter Haddle, Chris Dawson, and Ruth Noble. It's now my pleasure to introduce our facilitator, Ruth Noble, who will guide us through today's conversations and reflections. Ruth, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane. And welcome to you all on this day of living into the apology and exploring what that means to live into the apology. And so we're going to have a time of story sharing, reflection, hearing each other. There will be some breakout rooms so that we can share each other's wisdom and so that we can all share in story together. You are encouraged to come to this space any way that you are. If that means you want to sit and listen, that is totally fine. If it means you have a heaviness on your heart and you want to share, that is fine as well. If you want to give thanks for this conversation, any way you come here is where you belong here. And so, because all of us are coming here to learn about the apology and to learn how we can live into the apology, because this is all of our work as the United Church of Canada. So the apology was made in August of 2025 at the General Council 45 on a very wet day at Knox United Church in Calgary. It's one of many, there's a number of apologies the United Church of Canada has done. Apologizing is something that we are able as a church to do well. And that I don't say that as a criticism of the church. I say that as a gift of the church, that when we harm, we're able to say, I'm sorry. And to be able to say, I'm sorry, is really an act of faith. So this apology is one of many. There's been a number to the Indigenous communities, to those who were adopted. There's been a number of apologies in our United Church history. This apology dates back to 1988, and I remember well 1988 and the decision to accept lesbian and gays into the church and full membership. I remember how divisive it was at the time. I was in a church where our minister didn't agree with it, but the congregation did. And it created divide in our community of faith. And there were many stories of churches that wanted to leave, the community of concern that was created. It is a history that we hold and that we live into today with living into the apology. So that's what it means to live into the apology. It's living into who we are as a church and how we live out our faith in the church. So that's where we're going to enter into this time of conversation together. And we're really gifted to have some people who are going to be sharing stories about how they've been living into the apology and their responses to the apology. So I'm going to invite them in turn, and I'm just going to read their bios so that you can know the awesomeness of them as people. So Keith is going to be our first person presenting, and Reverend Keith Murray, they, them, is an artist called to ministry and as a minister called to creativity. They serve as the Minister of Outreach and Creative Partnership at Knox United Church in the heart of downtown Calgary in Treaty 7. Keith's work at Knox focuses on building creative relationships, civic artistic partnerships, and exploring new forms of ministry at the intersection of spirituality, justice, community, the arts, and ethic of the care for all. And Knox was where the apology was given in service. And it's also where, if you've seen the amazing glitter wall that has been used to live out Love Louder this season, this Pride season, that's where it is. And it was the brainchild of Keith to create this incredible rainbow glitter wall that you can see at Knox United Church. And then we're going to hear from Kendra Mitchell-Foster, who's the Regional Minister of Justice for Pacific Mountain Region of the United Church of Canada, a diaconal minister who believes deeply in the alchemy of storytelling and art to awaken an embodied, spirit-centered understanding of our communities in the world. She lives as an uninvited guest on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lady Tene, Prince George, BC, with her wife, 3 children, 2 dogs, and her cat. Kendra is a passionate person of justice. So I'm so thankful that Kendra's here to share stories. Every time I've been in conversation with Kendra, I become inspired. And then we have Chris Dolson, who's also going to be sharing. Chris Dolson has been part of Kamloops United Church. Kamloops was the 4th United Church of Canada to become an affirming ministry. And Chris has been the passionate leader of keeping that affirming ministry strong at Kamloops United Church. Chris is a leader and an elder in the Affirm United, and we're so grateful that Chris is here today as well. And so those are our speakers for today. And so I'm going to call upon Keith first to share their story of living into the apology. Keith.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, everyone. It's really nice to see you all. I'm honored to be here. Look at all your beautiful faces, some old friends, some new ones. So yeah, I'm Reverend Keith Murray. I'm affirmed by the use of they, them pronouns, but I will answer to anything said respectfully or sassily. And so I just wanted to start with that. So as Ruth mentioned, I am one of the ministers at Knox United Church in Mohkinstsis, or also known as Winchishpa Oyade, Kootsisil, Otosquanic, or Calgary in English. Those are the languages of the other members of the Treaty 7 and the Métis Nation, the Dene language there too. And so I just wanted to share that. I'm going to share a little bit. There may be some pieces of this that are comfortable, uncomfortable. So I just invite you to do what you need to take care of yourself. And I pray that we can all just show up with an open heart and be grounded in the love of God, that we can be present to both what we're growing into, but also the pain that we carry. So yeah, like Ruth had said, we were really honored to host the apology at Knox. And one of the things that we did prior to the apology was we installed this. Well, we put the church in drag, 100,000 1-inch sequins, holographic, shimmering sequins. But it's more than that. It's a permanent installation. Knox is a beautiful, 1912 sandstone historic building. But to those who maybe not know the church or who have been hurt by it, it can look like an intimidating fortress. And so we wanted something that reflected more of the beauty of what goes on inside. And if you look at the sequins, each one reflects all of the colors of the rainbow, but also has its distinct color to sort of share how we're all interconnected and we need each other. And so we wanted there to be a celebratory expression to help hold space for the heaviness of the apology. And so this was a gift of the community. Over 40 volunteers worked tirelessly, getting up on scissor lifts to install this thing, and continue to replace sequins as they get changed. But I just want to start with Knox. When I was reflecting on this, Knox has gone through its own time, a season of deep discernment. When I first found Knox, it was on the brink of death. It's now in a season of change and growth, thankfully. And at this time, when we were going through deep discernment, we came up with this tagline: open space, vibrant place, sacred connections. It's quite Trinitarian, and in many ways, I realize it reflects the call of the United Church: deep spirituality, bold discipleship, daring justice. Both of these taglines are beautiful aspirational visions, things we're trying to live into, and things we present publicly. But what I often find is that these things can be missing part of the reality. These statements, they're forward-facing of our hopes, expressions of our light. But like in Jungian psychology, there's this idea that the psyche, the whole of the spirit, In the formation of individuals, what we present forwardly is the persona, and what you don't see is the shadow. A Jungian psychologist, Willow Brake, who I met at another United Church, had said that any organization that is focused about the light can have a very big shadow. And so I think this is part of it. If you were new to a church, churches promise a lot in our vision, what we say about who we are, even salvation. But what if we were more honest in our advertising? I love how Nadia Bolz-Weber says this. In her book, Pastrix, she says, the tagline she would want for her church is, "Welcome to our church. We will disappoint you." She says every human community will disappoint us, regardless of how well-intentioned or inclusive. She says it's not a matter of when, it's a matter of when, not of if. So I think about that. What if we had a tagline in the United Church that was more honest? We will disappoint you. We will hurt you. Even affirming churches, I cannot promise to a new congregant they will not be hurt. I cannot be a minister that's on the shoulder of every congregation member, helping them to think before they speak. I sometimes want to say, you will get misgendered. Someone will make a joke that will hurt you. I will fuck up too. We're all broken people. And the reality is that none of us are perfect. Open space, vibrant place, sacred connections. But the reality is we're not always an open space. We're not always vibrant. Sometimes there's more disconnection than sacred connections. I think of the United Church, deep spirituality, bold discipleship, daring justice. Sometimes our spirituality can be shallow. Our discipleship can be tepid. Our justice timid, allowing injustice to persist. Shadow and the light, fractured parts of a greater whole. When Bolz-Weber says, we will disappoint you, she also says that she is totally idealistic about God's redeeming work in my life and in the world. She says, yes, we will let them down. Even I'll say something stupid and hurt their feelings, but I will then invite them on this side of their inevitable disappointment to decide if they will stick around after it happens. Jennifer Baldwin writes in Trauma-Sensitive Theology that Jesus integrated this truth of shadow and light in the wholeness of what they meant and represented brokenness and wholeness together. Baldwin says the twofold identification of Jesus as sinless and as victim of traumatizing wounds highlights the presence of trauma at the very heart of Christian identity and community. I think apologies in this way are the second part of the public-facing statements. They're the work of owning our shadow, of trying to clean up the brokenness when we have hurt others. And this cleanup process can take a long time. I remember when Peter came to Jesus and asked, if, a brother or sister or sibling sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? And Jesus says, not 7 times, but I tell you, 77 times, which is like ancient math for infinite, as long as it takes. It's not about being one and done, about saying it and getting over it. It's not about getting it right. And I think that's why we're all here today. Apologies, as we know, have 3 parts. There's the confession, the speaking of truth, the repentance, the changing, not doing it again, but then the reconciliation. And that path, as we learn in all of the work of reconciliation, it takes time and work. And it is a complete reframing of that persistent and sneaky seduction that seems to pervade so much of Protestant thought, the desire just to reduce things to this black and white transactional one and done thing. I remember when George Floyd happened, what did WASPy communities do? They formed a book club. It's like, what do we need to do to know that we're good, that we're right, to know that we, are in God's good graces again. But what if that's not the point? It's not about just doing the one thing and then checking a box. It's about 77 times showing up again and again and again to relationship. The point not being getting it right, but knowing we won't get it right. We will hurt each other, and we have to just keep practice showing up again and again. And this is hard because forgiveness and asking for forgiveness can sometimes mean 77 times for both of us, right? And so I think about this, and I want to share a little bit about what I know about trauma, but my friend Irshad Manji said this, and I think about this often in communities who've been wounded. She's talking about young people who are doing all this great work of pronouns and helping to parse identity. And she says, young people right now are really good about learning how to not be offensive, but equally need to learn how to not be offended. There's a relationship of having to practice forgiving ourselves and each other, but we need certain things in order to do that, because this is the process of healing and it is painful. Thomas Merton wrote, "As long as we're on earth, the love that unites us will bring us suffering by our very contact with one another, because this love is a resetting of a body of broken bones. Even saints cannot live with saints on this earth without some anguish, without some pain at the differences that come between them." That myth that healing is this joyful, painless thing is a myth. To figure out how we fit together, we have to reset our brokenness, our bones that comes with some anguish. And so what if we were more honest about that? In the same way, I want to just share this as we reflect how we can support each other on this journey of reintegration, of reconciliation. In the same way that the apology has 3 parts: confession, repentance, reconciliation. What we know about trauma, Judith Lewis Herman, in her book on trauma and recovery, says that there's a 3-stage process as well. And so according to her, the task of this process, there's a task with each of these stages. So the first stage is about the establishment of safety. You need to have a sense of safety first. The second stage is about making space for remembrance and mourning, speaking truth, allowing it to come out. And then the third stage is about reconnection with ordinary life. We often want to skip through some of those pieces, like, hear from our in our work with Indigenous reconciliation. You can't have reconciliation without truth first, right? And so the 2 important things that we know you need for recovery from trauma, for healing, are this. 1, authentic witness. So witness, just being able to be present, to hear the reality of the experience without downplaying or dismissing it, saying, oh, it wasn't that bad, and simultaneously not overemphasizing it and feeding the fire. It's like, oh, you're right, we should make them pay. Just allowing the witness to happen. That was part of this 10 years of the Iridescence Project, right? But the other important thing we need, other than witness, for anyone to heal, is resources to safely heal and integrate. So this means both time and space. This is essential before integration and reconciliation can happen. And the hardest problem with this that we have to remember is that for marginalized community members who are exposed to a world, when you are constantly re-traumatized, re-triggered, when you go out in the world and you get misgendered, when your violence is projected onto you, you don't have that safe space to heal. How can you be ready to reintegrate, to forgive, if your nervous system hasn't had a chance to calm down? So this is really important. So I want us to reflect when we go into our groups after we've had a chance to hear from everyone. These are some questions for us that is how can we reset our brokenness and build this body of Christ? What do we need to heal? What do others need? What do we have to provide to others so they can heal? How can we be witness without downplaying, without ramping up? How can we provide safe space for 2S LGBTQ community to be themselves? And then braver spaces for integration with the larger church. It's not going to happen in a one and done thing, but we're going to have to keep working at this as many times as it takes. I'll just leave you with one more thought. Reverend Joni Sankin, who I had a pleasure of studying with at VST, shared in her book about a traumative, sensitive theology and called Our Griefs to Bear, that what we can do in the meantime is to continue to bless. She says, blessing can bear witness to God's healing intentions for everyone, even when those are still unfolding in situations of brokenness and pain. Survivors may bear witness to healing and wholeness, even as it is still unfinished. And so my prayer is that we all remember that you are blessed, you are a blessing, and you're called to bless others, exactly as you are, as they are, wherever you may be on the healing journey. Know you're a beloved child of God. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Keith. That's amazing. Thank you. So our next speaker is Kendra. Kendra Mitchell Foster.
Sorry, somebody just rang my doorbell and my dog started barking right as I unmuted. Apologies for any crazy noise there.
Didn't hear a thing, so don't worry about that at all.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ruth and Jane and Therese, for inviting me here today. I have just a few slides with some pictures. Am I able to share my screen?
Yeah, I'll just give you that in a minute.
Yeah.
Great. Great. Okay. So yes, I'm so thrilled to be here. I excuse me. I'm so hopeful about all of us being here together and talking about animating the apology, talking about what it means to faithfully walk a path out from that moment of apology that we had last year in Calgary. Excuse me. And when that apology came, well, before it came, actually, I started having a journey of my own because I had had a time at work where I was on reduced hours and I felt like I wasn't on top of things. And then the apology came, and I thought, oh my gosh, I must have missed something. So, as the Justice Minister for Pacific Mountain Region, I thought, I need to be on top of this stuff. And the apology was coming, and I wasn't prepared, and I didn't realize it, and I've let my whole community down. And then I started talking to people, and they said, oh no, I didn't realize it was happening either. Or we thought it was going to happen, and then we thought it wasn't going to happen, and then it was going to happen. And there were a lot of people who had a similar experience of not being quite sure about when it was happening or how it was happening. And that led, no. And that led into, at the apology itself, people having a lot of questions. And so watching this service and being so grateful for all of the queer folks and 2S LGBTQIA plus folks who are a part of that apology, seeing it unfold in Calgary was amazing. And there were still questions. And after the apology happened, there were more and more questions. Um, and so myself and Pam Rocker, you can see on my little screen here down here is Affirming Connections. So Pam Rocker, as you folks may or may not know, does much of the affirming work for Chinook Winds region, and then is partners with me to do some of the work for Pacific Mountain region. So Pam and I were talking about it. What are we going to do? Thinking we would have to have something ready, something big to help people carry on the momentum. But what people really wanted was a space to discuss and to ask questions and to say, what happened? Where did this all come from? And that was the biggest question. Where did it all come from? So what we started asking was, what does the apology mean to you? Like, how are you feeling in this moment? What does it mean moving forward? Where are we starting? Not necessarily where have we been and now where are we going in a linear path, but which piece of this plethora, this variety of things that is ready for us, which piece are we going to begin with? And then where do we see it spiraling out from there? So, our vision for what's happening with the apology, and what I really believe in, is that we have to celebrate the wins and we need to pay attention to stories that maybe have not been shared. We have to pay attention to stories that are emerging continually, and we need to advocate. And so, combining these two, here we are we just had the Pacific Mountain Region AGM in Kamloops, and it was fabulous. Thank you, Chris. It was fabulous, and we had a really great response to the programming that we had. So Pacific Mountain Region is an affirming region, and every AGM we have an affirming night. And this year, because of all the questions of how did we end up at the apology, we did a dramatization, a presentation of the Iridescent Project play. So when we were digging back into who was involved in the apology, how was it written, whose voices were there, whose voices were maybe not front and center, we discovered that there were, and of course with Michiko Baunkai's, Reverend Michiko Baunkai's help, we discovered that we had missed decades of work that weren't front and center leading up to the apology. And those decades of work were in sort of summarized in the Iridescent play. And so this was put together by Reverend Aaron Michikoda, and we're forever grateful for their work. And so we got a hold of an original form of the script and then pared it down a little bit to something more manageable for smaller theater companies. Because we found on the internet the original 2018 video of the play, of the Iridescent play, watched it, and loved it. It's a play that is built on and written out of real correspondence, real stories that were offered to the project. And they involved lives and feelings, emotion, journeys, and like Reverend Keith said, traumas, real traumas in this journey from all of the people who were involved. So I see these two things in moving forward with advocacy and celebration as essential to be in conversation with one another. And so, as is my obsession with queer theology and all things theological, we've tied this in to my most current obsession of helping the United Church understand that queer theology is actually a liberation theology for the entire church. It's not a special gay thing that I get to listen to as a lesbian. It is a liberation theology that seeks to free us all from these binaries, these restrictions, and this bad theology that we have been wrapped up in because of our tradition, our denomination, because of all different kinds of things over the last centuries. So this all ties in, I promise. So So in January, we started visioning a deconstructing bad theology series with Jay Bricks, who's a trans ex-pastor, now tattoo artist in the St. Catharines area, who's been doing a lot of work on deconstruction, and pairing that with what is queer theology? How do we notice it? How do we live it? What are we learning about it? How do we embrace it fully and live it out as a church? And so we learned some of the building blocks in our month-long series. And then over the course of the summer, we are holding a queer and faithful Friday night cinema, one Friday each month of our summer season, to talk about a documentary or a film that we see that has connections to queer theology, and then have a discussion afterward around how we see these dynamics of queer theology tie into our own lives and tie into how we're going to be animating the apology. So, before we presented our play at the AGM, I did a very quick little blurb on what queer theology is. That it's talking about, thinking about, believing, and living with God from the particular perspectives of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community. Knowing that those perspectives are vastly diverse, and that these perspectives are valuable to the entire community. We also explicitly talked about how the apology and queer perspectives resist all different forms of oppression. And so this is, I like to say, it's a gateway drug. It's like a gateway theology into, into recognizing where we can make all of these different intersectional connections. It pushes back against patriarchy, whiteness and white centering, heteronormativity, cisnormativity, and idealized bodies. And it assumes that queerness is a sacred dynamic in God and in creation, and it's integrally present throughout time. So I'm going to skip these two other quick little slides here and come to the Irides play. So once we had a grounding in where we were coming from, why we were doing this play, how we want to frame this play as not just a pointing to a period in time, but an understanding of a collective process of coming out of the closet, coming out of this restrictive kind of theology and moving us forward. We had the Kamloops players come in and do our reading for us. The original script had, I think, enough space for 12 to 20 people, and we had put the script down to four different people reading multiple voices, and they came in as part of an overall Irides exhibit. So we had links to the Irides project website. We had a mini exhibit on the walls that talked about the goals of the project, about the diversity in the United Church of Canada, about history. We had reports and posters and other information available to people. And for some folks, we had some of the definitions up as well about the 1988 decision, which we know is the decision for all persons, regardless of sexual orientation, who profess their faith in Jesus Christ, are welcome to be or become members of the United Church of Canada, and that all members of the United Church are eligible to be considered for ordered ministry. There are still some folks who did not live through 1988 and are not close enough to 1988 to know that. So we want to make sure that we're educating people, and also about the issue years, the 10-year period after the decision, that were quite rocky in the church. So here you see the Kamloops players doing their run through. And here is our performance night. So the performance of the play took about half an hour to 35 minutes. We opened with a presentation and we were able to close with some reflections. And so these stories in the play, there are trigger warnings. There are lots of things that people have to think about and they want to reflect about. And at the end of the play, we gave people opportunities to reflect within themselves. We asked some of the Kamloops players to reflect on why they were so passionate about coming to do this project. And I asked, because this was the Pacific Mountain region, I asked Pam Rocker to reflect on what it was like to host this play in Chinook Winds as well. And what came forward was a really similar response to the apology. You know, this is really important. These stories are really important. And what does it mean? And where did it come from? I want to know more. And how do we get more of this out into the world to ask these questions? And so what we're going to be doing for our next Queer and Faithful Friday Night Cinema. So we are on the West Coast. So I apologize for the time for all of you East Coasters out there. But we will be holding our next Queer and Faithful Friday Night Cinema on June 26th. And it will be from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Pacific time. And at this Queer and Faithful Cinema, we will be showing the Pacific Mountain region version of the Irides play and offering space to reflect on that, to think about it, to ask questions, and to see where we want to move forward. Now, if you're not interested in staying up until 9:30 at night or 10:30 at night to watch this, it will be recorded and made available for everyone. So often I come across people who are saying, yes, this is great here, but how do I do this in my own community? Or I'm the only one in my community. I don't know that I could stage a play. How do I do this? And so a big part of my work as the Pacific Mountain Region Justice Minister is to create tools that are to be made available. So you can contact me if you're interested in anything that we've made here or that Affirming Connections has made with Chinook Winds. And please join us on the 26th. And if you don't join us on the 26th, please come to our website and our YouTube channel, which are going to be updated, and they should have these resources there. The Irides play is a powerful play. It is a way of engaging in that creative transformation, that creativity that helps us to break open a little bit wider our ideas of what's possible and maybe of what has happened in the past. And I think if we can get people to engage with our own story as the United Church, not just, the queer progressive church that marches and parades, but a church that has wrestled with its own identity, a church that has made mistakes, that has made promises, and now that has made an apology. I think if we can have people engaging in that story, then the possibilities in our future growth are much wider. And that's it. That's the end of my that's the end of my slideshow. But I wanted to also just say as well that putting on the Irides play, it took some forethought, but it is a relatively straightforward thing to do. There is no set that's needed. You don't have to memorize your lines. Anyone can do it. Anyone can read it. And engaging in this kind of transformative creativity, I think, is how we need to ground ourselves as we move forward and animate the apology. So thank you so much for having me here. I hope that wasn't too rapid fire.
That was awesome, Kendra. Thank you so much. I mean, I remember being in the Irides play, and it is powerful. It's wonderful to hear that Irides is living. Those stories are so strong and so powerful. So thank you so much for that. And it's been great. First, Keith setting the stage for what it means to be a broken church and what it means to live into this work and the theology, and then Kendra helping with here's what we can do, here's Irides, here's what we have done. And so it's wonderful to hear you guys. It's like you guys talked to each other before you were going to present, because melded into each other. And so we're going to hear from Chris, and then we'll move into breakout rooms and move into the next part. So thank you much, Chris.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Thank you, Keith and Kendra. Keith, I was busy writing down some pithy quotes. Thank you for that. And Kendra, I'm now even more devastated. I had family commitments. The region meeting was in my backyard and I couldn't be there. I missed the play, but I'm inspired now. I'm going to get your contacts at the Kamloops Players and look out, KUC. There's a show coming to a place near you. Anyway, I want to tell you about the worship service that we did at Kamloops United, and that was back on November 2nd. We did a worship service that was entirely focused on the apology. Everyone who was in attendance received their souvenir worship or supplemental souvenir bulletin that was solely devoted to the apology. It had all the text. It had similar cover art to the bulletin from the General Council apology delivery, all the words, and the back page was sort of a collage of Kamloops United Church at Pride events. And I don't know how many attendees took home that apology bulletin, but I really like to think that some of the copies spent some time on kitchen counters or on coffee tables and maybe stimulated some conversations before they got recycled. That's all I can hope for. At that service, I was responsible for speaking the welcome and the acknowledgements, which KUC begins every service with an acknowledgement of the Kamloops Disher territory and with a statement about KUC being Two-Spirit and LGBTQIA plus affirming. That day, I wove together the land acknowledgement with the legacy of colonial churches, the gospel imperative to be loving, justice-seeking people, and how all of that impels us to be affirming. When I gave the introduction to the service, I let folks know that I would be focusing on the apology, or that the whole service would be focusing on the apology, and that I would be reading the apology later in the service. Then I turned the gaze backwards and I delivered a brief history and timeline leading up to the delivery of the apology. And it was a really fast Reader's Digest condensed version, and I had to talk really fast. I started in the 70s, blew right through the decades of the United Church queer history, finishing with the apology in August, and then summarized some of the responses to that apology. And I concluded that part of the service with sort of some speculation, my own speculation, and some questions about what was next. And I asked the congregation what they would like to see happen. Our minister, Reverend Dr. Michael Cavanagh, led the rest of the liturgy, and he did the preaching. And we had a guest speaker who was awesome. It's the second time, or it was the second time, that we had invited this person to speak. His name is Dr. Nick Hernick. He is an assistant professor at Thompson Rivers University here in Kamloops, and he is an interdisciplinary historian trained in women's and gender studies, queer studies, and social justice. And one of Nick's research interests is queer history, and he spoke eloquently about Canadian queer history with a lot of references, frequent references to the many intersections with the United Church of Canada's queer history. And for me, I think that the historical context really highlighted, and I mean, just as Kendra mentioned, like people were unaware of that history. I think that this really highlighted for the unaware just how long the issue has been an issue. And I mean, Nick talked about some pretty tough stuff, and to sort of remind people or let them know for the first time, perhaps how harmful and violent even that history was. Something that I think set this service apart also was the very intentional invitation of some other guests. And in particular, Michael Cavanagh reached out to Wilbur Turner, who is the president and executive director of Advocacy Canada and author of the Queerly Beloved Substack. Wilbur drove over to Kamloops from Kelowna, and he later posted on Substack and social media about his experience at our service and his own reflections on the apology. And I think there was a tremendous amount of value in having that apology message reach a wider audience than just our KUC congregation. During coffee time after worship, Michael and I and our guest speaker, Nick, had many people approach us with kudos and questions. And it's kind of funny to me because months later, I still get random thank yous from members of the congregation. In particular, there's one gentleman, a little older than me, who has frequently mentioned that he was raised Orthodox. He has thanked me so many times for the affirming work, but in particular for the work that we've done on the apology. Our congregation only just returned to our sanctuary after a year and a half of rebuilding after a fire. The redecorating is still in progress. My next little project is to get a big, beautiful rendition of the apology to frame and hang in our lobby and see what conversations spring from that. I'm all about the very visible symbols. We have an awful lot of community people coming through our facility. It's used for many different concerts and other events. And I just appreciate every opportunity for people to say, oh, what's that about? Let's have a conversation. So that was our apology service. And thanks for asking me to tell you about it.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's wonderful to hear you talk about the apology service, and just, it's amazing. Thank you so much to all our speakers. You've just inspired me, and so I hope you have inspired others to think about how they can live out the apology in their communities of faith and in their own lives as people of faith. So we're going to move into some breakout rooms now. It's going to be about 20 minutes. Is that right, Jane? I'm going to have about 20 minutes in breakout rooms. Does that work? So the questions as you go into your breakout room are as follows. What stood out for you from what you've heard so far? In your context, what feels possible right now? What questions or hesitations exist within your community? And what might living into the apology look like where you are? So we're going to move into some breakout rooms now, and then we'll come back and we'll have a little bit of time of sharing and some question and answer as well. So we are coming up to time. So,
and those questions are in the chat.
Yes, they are in the chat. Thank you, Therese.
Twice.
My group did. I hope you had a great conversation, and you got to be able to share, and you had some ideas, and you had some thoughts. So we have about 20 minutes left before the end of our webinar. So do we want to go around and share one little thing, or just ask questions? Jane, your wisdom, how should we frame the last 20 minutes of our time together?
I think we can welcome folks to share anything
Okay.
that stood out for them in their small breakout groups.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So anyone who want to share from their breakout groups, anything that came up that you'd like to, the rest of the group, the larger group, to know from your conversation?
I'll just share from my group because I took some notes. I'll just share 3 things that came up, and if people want to share more, feel free to. So one was sort of a comment that affirming is not a one and done, and there was a question about whether Affirm United has a reaffirm process, a process for congregation, a gentle process,
So
not saying you lose
that meeting
not,
with the
not
city.
saying you lose your status, but a way to sort of reaffirm that they've been affirming. This congregation has been affirming for a couple of decades, and
Well, we are.
there was
Okay, I'm gonna write down these questions. So keep going.
There was a comment about how important it can be when clergy share their pronouns, knowing that not everybody feels safe, even clergy sometimes, to do that, but that how powerful that can be, and a message of safety it is conveyed through that. And the other was the Irides report, and to take a look at that, like take a look at the information that was sent in the registration, and in the Irides report, there are some really simple things that the church can do that are italicized, and a strong urging to the church to do that, to live into it.
Thank you.
I could share a few things from our group that's helpful. One of the biggest things that came up was a conversation around safety and how the image, the forward or outward facing image of the United Church is really affirming, and that some folks may understand that as every single United Church is affirming, and they're not. And that we think this is Julian had said that it's likely 11 or 12% of congregations that are affirming. And so there's lots of work to be done into living out this apology in terms of bringing congregations to the place where more of them are resourced, equipped to become affirming. I think that's a really big one. And then acknowledging that some of this work is really difficult. In some places, it's quite safe to do this work, and in some places, it is not that safe to do this work. And so, making sure that we're supporting different congregations, groups, families, individuals, according to their safety, according to their context, and the culture, the church culture that they have in those areas.
It's about 15% that are affirming in the United Church. It was 17, but we lost a few that closed. So I just calculated that this morning, actually. It's 15%. Any other groups? Kathy G is asking, how can we access the script for the Irides project? Kendra, is it on the website? Is it on the Irides website?
I'm sorry, is which on the Irides website?
The Irides play.
No, it's not. But we can share it. We can provide it. So, if people would like it, I have got a few different versions of it, and Pam Rocker has a few different versions of it. And so, if you email me, I put my email in the chat, but maybe Jane and Ruth, I can give my contact information to you, and it could go out in an email to participants of today or something. And then I can send out any versions that you might be interested in. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so email Kendra for the play. And you can email Chris. Oh, actually, the Kamloops United Church website has the service that they did on the apology. Chris said in the chat.
Not our website, but on our Kamloops United Church YouTube channel.
Oh, okay. On the YouTube channel. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm just seeing chats here. At our recent Canadian Shield Regional Meeting, Peter Haddo recommended that even congregations that may not choose to become affirming would benefit from the process of going through the learning involved in preparing to apply to become an affirming congregation. Yes. And if you go to affirmmunited.com, you can find the Open Hearts document that will take you through the affirming process. It's a great resource for every congregation, and it's just been newly edited, and it's awesome. So. Any other groups? And I could share what my group talked about. We talked about safety and aspiring to be a safe space, because you can't always be a safe place. We talked a lot about brokenness and trauma and recovery are elements of safety. And we talked about perhaps we need a visible image of the apology that people can post in their congregations, like a poster of the apology, so that people can put it up and start conversation that way. We talked about a couple of books that are around. Michael Riordan's book, The First Stone, which is about leading up to 1988, and Donald Schmidt's Homosexuality for Progressive Christians book. So we started talking about books, and we talked about trauma and safety. Others?
If I can jump in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Michiko.
One of the lessons that came from my involvement with this work is how much the 88 decision was people experiencing a lack of safety in the fact that they felt like the church didn't know how to handle conflict. So people making decisions, voting, going back to their congregations, and the fact that it brought up what could have been invitations to a prophetic witness, what could have been an opportunity for leaning in, curiosity, deep listening, I think the postures of being affirming that are so important, the sort of the technologies that enable us to be in community where we practice grace, as Reverend Keith was sharing earlier, and how what I've experienced is that people struggle to return to this conversation because the trust that the church has a capacity to engage in conflict faithfully with safety isn't there. So one-on-one, I might have a conversation and they'll say, well, this is my story, but I don't really want to talk to the church about it. I don't really want to get into it in this more corporate communal setting. Has been one of the things that I think has created a lot of challenge. And so figuring out the ways in which I think the community building has to happen pastorally, one-on-one, or more intimate spaces to invite people into these like larger containers of sharing. And I think like for me as someone who's done the work, like I was not alive in 1988. And so I'm able to engage with this work without the same baggage in terms of it, and I think it is important for us to be thinking intergenerationally when we do this work about whose voices are at the table, because I know that there's Gen Z people also that have their own perspective around this conversation. This grew up in a different time, different place where the conversation's happening, say in their schools, or different things shape their expectations of what their church would offer them. And I think that that can be a real gift as we honor the fact that many of our elders are people that are holding a lot of trauma and that their survival coping strategies has been silence for so long, and that this is asking them to move in a very different space to re-engage in a conversation almost 30 years later.
Thank you. Thank you, Michiko. Any others? Okay. Oh, yes, Ken.
It's not from my group, but one of the other comments, one of the other things, I don't know what national body internet would do this, but in 1999 was the first gay lesbian consultation of the church. At that time, we could not find anyone who identified as transgender, and we could only find one person who would identify as bisexual. But we came up with 36 recommendations what the national church could do to improve our situation. Unfortunately, it came a time of restructuring,
Mm.
and it sort of slipped away, and I don't know where it is or what's happened to it. But some of those recommendations are probably still possible.
Thank you for that, Ken. Graham, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Ruth. I recognize and I appreciate the challenges that many folks have with being an affirming congregation, with being affirming themselves. I appreciate that some folks feel that it's not safe, particularly cishet folks feel it may not be safe for them to be public, intentional, and explicit about their support for our community. I know that's hard. I would urge those folks to just consider, and I say this without judgment, but I would urge those folks to consider just how hard it is for many of us, historically and even right up to the present. Our existence is condemned and we are persecuted, and maybe not always in the United Church, but not always, but sometimes in the United Church. And I could speak to personal experience of that, including in affirming congregations, but certainly in the larger church. To be a member of the queer community and to publicly identify as a Christian, to be an active member of both communities who are so often at odds with each other, is perhaps one of the most challenging things that there can be. I can always stop going to church. I can always hide my Christianity. My husband and I are never going to hide our queerness. I fought for too long. I was in my early 40s. I've only been out 25 years. I fought for far too long to understand and appreciate who I am. Yet I'm still here. Just since I know Chris is on this, my first ever service, I came into the United Church in Kamloops on the day Kamloops United became an affirming congregation. So thanks, Chris, and thanks, KUC. You're a big part of my journey. It was long before I was out. But anyway, yeah, I've said enough.
Thanks for sharing, Graham. Yes, Susan.
I'll try to be brief here. Two comments, and they're sort of general comments. I'm a retired family physician. I learned more from my United Church of Canada about queerness and the importance of us becoming a whole church by becoming affirming long before I learned anything from my medical community. And so I am so grateful to the people who have moved us forward. It changed, obviously, the kind of parent I was and the kind of physician I was, as well as a person and a United Church member. And two, we have an amalgamation of two congregations happening in Sudbury, where I attend, and we've been affirming, but the congregation that's coming to us has not been. I know there's some fear amongst those who are part of our original affirming congregation about, well, how explicit are we here that we're affirming? But what's happened is the minister has had people give little presentations about their journey of faith. And that has been profound because so many people in the queer community have just spoken openly about why they're coming to the church. And those people's voices, I think, change hearts about in the congregation, because people know, we all know each other now. Anyway, just a couple of comments. I think all the education that we do is vital for people's safety.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, so we're coming up on our time. And so thank you everyone for sharing and being so vulnerable and sharing what you're feeling. And this is like the first of many conversations that we will be having. There are a number of resources that you can look into. There is the apology pullout that's in the gathering. That's also on the United Church website. And there's stuff on the affirmunited.com website as well. And so I'm also going to turn it over to Jane if she has anything that she would like to share as we wrap up our time together and talk about next steps. Jane's just put it in the chat, the link for all the apology worship resources that are on the United Church webpage. Any other comments, Jane?
Thank you so much, Ruth. And thank you everybody for coming. Thanks to our guest speakers for sharing their experiences, and for each one of you for bringing your wisdom and honesty and commitment to this conversation. And also for the helpful information that you put in the registration forms. It's going to help the Interim Working Group think about the next steps as we move towards the anniversary of the apology and moving forward. So I'd like to welcome Therese for our closing prayer just before we close. And I wish that the Spirit guide us in each faithful step as we move ahead. And I wish you meaningful Pride season and every blessing as you continue to live into this apology in your own communities. Chris. I mean, Therese. Sorry about that.
Oh. So I'm just going to lift up some words that Reverend Keith spoke into this space. And I'm going to say these words 3 times and let whichever piece of it soak in, comfort you, disturb you, inspire you. You are blessed. You are a blessing. You are called to bless others. You are blessed. You are a blessing. You are called to bless others. You are blessed.